So I think what's really fascinating is that there have been a number of recent studies looking at brain structural differences between liberals and conservatives. And what's been found in several studies is that liberals tend to have a larger anterior cingulate gyrus. That is an area that is responsible for taking in new information and that impact of the new information on decision-making or choices. Conservatives tended on the whole to have a larger right amygdala being a deeper brain structure that processes more emotional information, specifically fear-based information. So it's really responsible for the flight or fright response.
You are not doing that!
You're supposed to be our advocate!
You should be at the event last night when you hear Franco say that she doesn't know how to create a safe space for her freshmen in Silliman. How do you explain that? These freshmen come here, they think this is what Yale is? Do you hear that? They're gonna leave, they're gonna transfer because you are a poor steward of this community. You should not sleep at night. We're out, we out. You're disgusting.
That's not going to happen. You know, you can learn something from a real lady for once.
I hope you guys weren't paying 23% more than me.
Why not consider the possibility, the radical notion, that you could be wrong?
We want an open conversation of ideas. You guys can't be one of those enough to literally wait 10 minutes from the point where we open the floor.
Less than 10% of rapes are actually reported.
Okay, where's that?
To the cops.
Where's that?
It's from all of the women's organizations. You can look it up online. You can find it through the socialized organizations that study rape. I participate with an organization that works as a rape crisis center. We base that on the number of calls. The police know, based on the unofficial reports, the third-party reporting, and the direct reports. This is not a secret that about 10% of rapes are reported.
So how do you know 10% of rapes are reported if the others aren't?
Because those people call the women's centers, they ask for help, they seek medical attention.
So they are reported.
But let me say this, black people cannot be racist.
They're fucking soulless.
Knowing who Jordan was, I believe he would want me to offer forgiveness. Although I know I may struggle with that endeavor for the rest of my life, it would be what Jordan would want. On behalf of Jordan and myself, I will pray for forgiveness for both of you.
And no matter what sentence the court imposes today, these defendants will have to answer to God. God's got this.
I'd like to say sorry to the families of Aiyana Jones, Michael Brown, Eric Gardner, and I want to apologize to them for not being able to get justice for their loved ones who was murdered in cold blood. And in respect for the peaceful protest, I want to say hands up, don't shoot, Black Lives Matter. That's it, Your Honor.
Very familiar. It's not about the the chromosomes within our nuclei. Yeah, go ahead.
Chromosomes don't necessarily mean you're male or female.
Gender.
With gender
identity. Go ahead. No, so
especially, but even so, you have a thing like Klinefelter's syndrome. So you don't know what you're talking about. You're not educated on genetics.
Would you like to discuss the genetics? Or
well, no,
what
no.
Are your genetics?
So I'd stay away from the genetics and back to the brain scans.
You cut that out now, or you'll go home in an ambulance.
Yeah, that seems mildly inappropriate for a political discussion.
No, I know. Well, but wait, to be fair, but to be fair, you're actually being kind of rude.
You're
and that's not fair.
I'm sorry, it's not rude to say that someone who's biologically a male is a male.
You just
someone who's biologically male is a male.
there it was. There I was thinking it was just me that had a problem, but it turns out it's the air conditioning that's sexist.
I know. So many women in our office have the exact same problem. You know, we just sit there absolutely freezing at our desks trying to type. You can probably tell I've got a cold right now, which I blame all on the AC.
As retaliation for the collective crime of racism, anti-Semitism, misogyny, and homophobia. All you fucking God-botherers are war criminals and liars and charlatans. Atheism forever! No, this is real. I'm throwing back everything you dirty goyim have thrown back at us. Hitler was a Christian. He killed Jews because his non-existent God told him to. Hitler was a practicing Catholic. Now I even found on the internet a picture of a Nazi swastika. It was made by the Nazis, and it had a cross on it. It said, "God is with us," in German. Yeah, so don't give me that whole crap about Nazis.
I am Alice Walker. You and me have equal pay. I fight for it every day. This was the second wave, and now we're on our way. Owning property. Women educated. Freedom from domestic violence. And the right to vote, baby. Hey, I just met you.
Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar!
So, this video is directed towards people who are already kind of understanding that gender is a social construct, but maybe aren't sold or haven't thought about the idea that biological sex is also a social construct.
In terms of interpreting the meaning of different size structures for a liberal versus a conservative, I think you have to look at what that area is predominantly responsible for. So, for instance, for conservatives, if your right amygdala is enlarged, and that's the fear processing area, you would expect maybe choices or decisions or character and personality to be more informed by a response to a fearful situation. So, for example, conservatives, in fact, in personality studies, do tend to rate higher in areas of stability, loyalty, not liking change, being more religiously involved in terms of decision making, having that rate higher for them in making certain choices. And if you look at liberals from a personality character standpoint, you're going to find stronger ratings in terms of liking change, wanting to actually base decision making on new information, on science information. And so those differences are not surprising in light of these brain structural differences.
Over the course of her career, a working woman with a college degree will earn, on average, hundreds of thousands of dollars less than a man who does the same work. Now, that's wrong. I don't want that for Malia and Sasha. I don't want that for your daughters. I don't want that to be an example that any child growing up ends up accepting as somehow the norm. I want every child to grow up knowing that a woman's hard work is valued and rewarded just as much as any man's. So to anyone who says 77 cents on the dollar sounds pretty close to equal, I say, your math is bad. You wouldn't like it if your vote only counted in 3 out of 4 elections.
Storhaug, who works on behalf of the rights of women, has been called a racist and an Islamophobe by the left in Norway. Something else that Muslim immigration appears to have brought to Norway is what some here call a rape epidemic. Recent police statistics showed that in the capital of Oslo, 100% of assault rapes between strangers were committed by immigrant non-Western males, and 9 out of 10 of their victims were native Norwegian women, and blaming the victims, because the whole notion that Islamic culture is dangerous to women is very politically incorrect here.
The Black Lives Matter movement traveling across the country, not only via rallies, but also through the news media and pop culture. The St. Louis Rams causing an uproar among police after several players take the field with their hands in the air. And it has had staying power. Even months after the grand jury decision, Pharrell turns his hit Happy into a dark performance, incorporating the tagline at February's Grammys.
Hands up.
The words echo through Congress, too. Some assuming it is true that Brown actually had his hands up. For others, it is a symbol.
We want you to know that our hearts are out there marching with them.
Here at CNN, a panel of commentators moved by the protests put their own hands up after the grand jury decision. Some people celebrated it, but others were outraged by the continued use of the phrase.
The St. Louis Rams think it's cool for them to suggest that St. Louis cops shoot young black men who have their hands up in the air when we know that that was a lie? It's a lie.
Washington Post writer Jonathan Capehart concluding this week that Hands Up Don't Shoot is, quote, built on a lie. In fact, a Department of Justice report concluded that evidence contradicts eyewitness claims that Brown had his hands up.
Black Lives Matter.
Now, as protesters call for justice, some are phrasing it differently. Black Lives Matter.
White motherfuckers out here, y'all not brats. Fuck y'all. Hey, what's your name? Let that be your chat. 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 Don't worry about it, bitch. Shut the fuck up. I don't give a fuck about none of that. I don't give a fuck about that.
She's one of the organizers of the Black Lives Matter movement. And yesterday, Yusra Kogali helped lead a march on Queen's Park decrying racism. In February, however, Kogali posted what could be interpreted as a hate message of her own on social media. News Talk 1010 found this tweet. Please, Allah, give me strength not to cuss, kill these men and white folks out here today. Please, please.
They got violent, smashing windows of stores and cars.
Seeing now is that actually people are tending to double down on their own style and what appeals to their own group of thinkers. And that is increasingly preventing the kind of communication that would be important to our future, so that we can't, so to speak, cross the aisle, because it would require trying on for size the thought pattern of the other group. It would be saying, you know, I feel, and that's hard to do. Let me say that is difficult to do. So if your amygdala is screaming at you, you know, run for the hills, or, you know, double down and fight, it's hard to say, well, let me take a step back and not have a fear-based reaction, but instead present the science or present the new information. The most recent study looking at what is going on in the brain in terms of politics predicted with the greatest value being able to identify a conservative versus a liberal, 82.6%. And this was a look at brain activity, which is different. You put someone in a functional MRI, which is different than just taking a picture. It picks up activity in a certain area of the brain, and found that when you have them do a risky behavior and look at their activity in their brain, conservatives were more likely to light up in the fright and flight response area, the amygdala. And liberals were more likely to light up in areas that have to do with social awareness.
You've written a trilogy of books about people you call the anointed, which are basically liberals in American society. What do you mean by calling them anointed or self-anointed?
That's right. There are people who seriously believe that they are wiser and nobler than others, and that the way to improve society is to have the government force people to follow what the anointed want, rather than let people do what they themselves want to do. And there are all kinds of fiascos that follow in the wake of this kind of notion.
Conservatives are routinely blamed for not caring about people, and yet you say just the opposite is true, that it's liberals who care about their vision of how the world should be, but not about real-life human beings.
Absolutely. I think the busing thing was a classic example. You would be hard-pressed to show how black people, white people, or any other people were benefited by this. But the liberals loved it. It enabled them to be morally superior to those who were fighting against busing. And the evidence, one way or the other, really did not interest them. Whereas I think conservatives want to stop people from being disadvantaged. In other words, the liberals want to help the poor while they're poor, but really the biggest benefit is to stop them from being poor. And that they have very little interest in.
What is the liberal premise?
I guess the Rousseau notion, that man is born free but is everywhere in chains, that the real problem with the world is that the institutions are wrong. If the institutions were right, then there was nothing in human nature that would cause us to be unhappy. It's the fact that we have the wrong institution.
What is the conservative premise?
That man is flawed from day one, and that there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs, and whatever you do to deal with one of man's flaws, it creates another problem, but that you try to get the best trade-off you can get, and that's all you can hope for. I've often said there are three questions that I think would destroy most of the arguments on the left, and the first is, compared to what? The second is, at what cost? And the third is, what hard evidence do you have? Now, there are very few ideas on the left that can pass all three of those kinds of things.
Can conservative ideas pass those?
Yes, I think so, because they don't assume that there is a solution out there. Adam Smith didn't believe that either the government or the market could solve all problems, that you have to be able to simply tolerate certain things. And the idea to the left of tolerating any evil, that they want to stamp out the last vestige of segregation. Really? At what price?
The lights are burning, all faded out. Is anybody seeing this? We've left the dead behind